Our next guest is Stephen Jacobi. Now, you haven't come across him yet, but he is he's had an enormous background in actual fact. Talking about, he's got first class honours degree in French and German. Did you know that, Regan? No, you didn't. There you are, you see. And he went to Georgetown University as well in Washington, D.C. He was a Deputy High Commissioner, our Deputy High Commissioner in Ottawa, an Assistant Trade Commissioner in Paris. He's been an advisor on trade and diplomatic issues with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and he was also advising a former Minister for Trade Negotiations on trade policy and the like. So he's enormously experienced in industry and trade development, obviously, as well as serving as the Chief Executive of New Zealand Forest Industries Council and a variety of other roles as well. He now runs his own consulting firm called Jacobi Consulting Limited. But he's going to be joining us very soon. Is he online yet, Josh? No? You're going to let me know? Oh, he is there. Sorry, I can't see you. Sorry, Stephen, and I'd like to. You can probably see me. Welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Where are you based? Wellington?
Well, you know what? About a year and a half ago, we moved to Napier.
Oh, excellent idea. But you've had a crap summer, mate.
I'm in the wonderful Hawke's Bay that you know well.
Yeah, I do. So where in Napier are you based? Are you with the knobs on the hill?
Yeah, afraid so. Hospital Hill. But lovely view across to Cape Kidnappers.
Oh, it's a magnificent place. I used to have a flat in Seeley Road, 15 Seeley Road.
Yeah, know it well. Yeah, know it well.
And we had the upper, I think they've turned into a grand house now, but in those days it was divided into an upper, we had the upper house. Lots of police raids, lots of drug checks. I had some nefarious flatmates at the time, but there you go. I seem to have recovered from that. It's a lovely place. It is a wonderful place. Listen, mate, thank you for joining us today. And as I said, you've got an extensive background in trade and in foreign policy and in representing New Zealand abroad as well. I'm interested in your thoughts on Donald Trump, on tariffs and what the implications are for New Zealand. But before we get there, I've looked back on what Donald Trump was saying on tariffs during his election campaign. And so I'm not as surprised, I guess, as it seems other media commentators are, that he's actually gone and done it. Because he said he was going to. And he seems to have got a view that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something, and that's the end of it. Were you surprised, or did you would have thought, no, this was predictable, or did you think that the policymakers in Washington would talk him out of it?
Well, that's a good place to start, isn't it? I mean, it's often said that a week is a long time in politics, but these days a day is a long time in trade, because we've seen, all sorts of things over the last week or so with announcements made and then retracted, then moving forward. But on the central question, was I surprised? At one level, I'm not surprised, because as you said, he indicated very clearly what he intended to do. But on his first day in office, when he said he was going to take a lot of trade action, he didn't. He signed a very long and boring memorandum instructing various agencies of the United States government to come back to him by the 1st of April on a whole lot of issues to do with trade, including steel and aluminium, and including Canada and Mexico and China and a whole lot of other things. So I guess we were thinking that, maybe a more considered approach is being taken, or maybe he's really building up the case for the sorts of restrictive trade action that he really wants to take. And so when the announcement of the tariffs against Canada and Mexico and China came out, I have to say I was a little taken back. I mean, what was the point of asking for all this work to be done if the conclusion had already been reached? But it seems to be a feature of the presidency that it's shock and awe, that you keep moving very quickly. You do a lot of things, some of them stick, some of them don't, in order to make the progress that you as the president feel is required. So that's the situation we find ourselves in today. It is interesting, though, that the justification for some of these measures, for example, the ones he took against Canada and Mexico and originally China, are different from the ones he's using for these steel and aluminium tariffs. This one is much more conventional trade type of action that has taken place in the past, but of course has all sorts of negative effects, which doubtless we can talk about.
Yeah, let's do that. The 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports certainly left our trans-Tasman neighbours scrambling, although that's interesting developments personally between Prime Minister Albanese and Donald Trump over the last 24 hours. I'll come back to that in a second. But we have two major export-based companies in New Zealand Steel and Tiwai Point Aluminium Smelter down in the Bluff, that I'm assuming will be affected by this tariff?
Yes, most certainly. Of course, they are already affected by the tariffs that President Trump enacted in his previous administration, and which President Biden completely failed to overturn. So I should say there have been some workarounds made. I mean, some of the products produced by New Zealand Steel and by the aluminium smelter are quite specialised. So trade has continued, but they have been paying the tariff.
Okay, so it hasn't affected their overall trading position. We're not likely to have, for those particular industries, a flow-on effect here, or we just have to wait and see?
Well, I think for those industries in particular, the United States is not a huge market in the first place. So, they have been able to continue doing business. Secondly, the tariff on aluminium was only 10% previously. It's now going to rise to 25%. Now, there's a big difference between a 10% and a 25% tariff. We've had a 5% depreciation against the US dollar, over the last 6 months or so. And the 5% that's remaining is not material. So who knows exactly how it's going to work out? And those industries and companies are best placed to talk to themselves about what the actual input or impact on their business is. But it doesn't seem to be impacting the wider trade relationship with the United States, because that has been going gangbusters, as you know. They're now our second largest trading partner.
Well, and that's the other thing. I've noticed some sort of murmurings from the New Zealand wine industry at the moment, who sell an awful lot of wine, as you know, into actually just down the road from you. A number of those wineries would be selling a lot of wine into the United States at the moment. Now, they're getting concerned. Should they be?
Well, I think they should be concerned because they export, $750 million of wine to the United States. It enters the United States free of duty. And if the president decided to proceed with one of the ideas he's been talking about, which is a universal tariff of either 10 or 20%, they could be severely impacted. Again, I don't think 10% would be a killer necessarily, but 20% certainly would impact on the competitiveness of New Zealand wine in the United States. But whether he decides to implement those tariffs, he's also talked about a reciprocal tariff. So this would be that if trading partners penalize the United States with tariffs, the United States will penalize that partner with tariffs. Well, of course, New Zealand has been wanting a reciprocal arrangement with the United States for a long time. We'd be happy. It'd make our day. We'd be happy to do that. But of course,
let's just talk about that for a moment. So, but go back to the wine industry. There aren't. If he's talking about tariffs right across the board, one presumes it's for one point and one purpose only, and that is to protect American companies that are making everything from wine to steel to potatoes to meat, whatever it might be. Is that the rationale here? It's all about protection of farmers, manufacturers in the United States of America?